Hey, it's me back with another live stream. Yeah, where I am on the planet, it's a little late, or early rather. It's almost like 4 a.m. But I kind of fell asleep and woke up, and here we are. So I saw that SZA had dropped her deluxe album, new album, and so I mean I haven't listened to the full project. This isn't a review, but it's a perspective about just like the rollouts that's been happening around this time. And this is very short and sweet. And plus, like I haven't live streamed in a minute, so here we are. Now, what's interesting is that um when Alicia Keys was on Drink Champs, they were talking about how rolling out an album during the fourth quarter is kind of like a tricky thing to do. Like you only do that if you know it's going to be a success. That's why most people come out with their albums like in the summertime or before the summer. So like festival season, they could push their album. They know there's performances. And even like say if you go to a festival, say if people might know the artists like that, but because there's so many known artists that are there, you might end up being discovered there and build your fan base and all those things. And so I think it's interesting that for the second time, I'm not sure exactly when Control was released, but SOS, the original, came out fourth quarter, like right before the holidays. And then she did the whole SNL thing and, the rollout and stuff. And I was like, okay, it's an interesting move. And, there was a lot of discussion about like her being frustrated about the process because the album was already done and she wanted to put it out. People kept bothering her, like, SZA, where's the music? And then, but it ended up being a really good rollout for her and it was a success, even though it was holiday season. Most people shy away from releasing new music before the holidays unless you know it's going to be a success. So not only is it interesting that SZA released her album during holiday season, but so did Kendrick, technically. His literally came out a few weeks ago, um, at the end of November. And and so it's interesting that they both released during the holiday season. And not only that, but they announced their tour, right? So I had a feeling that either he's gonna be dropping a second album because there's a lot of talks, and even with the Squabble Up video, there's a lot of Easter eggs around double albums. So either he was gonna release another project or she was gonna release a project because there was already talk. She had already like hinted at releasing new music and even like the whole like field aesthetic that's around the deluxe album that she just dropped. She was already hinting at that. So yeah, I think that that's interesting. And you know, and she's one of the hugest R&B artists right now. Um, and it's interesting because I seen a post online. I forget who it was. I think it was the Groove, and they basically did a video on like Rihanna taking a break from music, and it's almost coming up on 10 years since she came out with Auntie, and that's a whole nother think piece in itself. But um, you know, there's been a lot of talks in terms of like the void of R&B pop space that Rihanna has left. And I guess in a way, like SZA kind of like, and the thing is, they're completely different artists, right? I feel like Rihanna's definitely more pop, but she can like go into like R&B, hip hop kind of a vibe. And SZA's just a completely different sound and aesthetic, I feel. But I feel like SZA's kind of like picked up the baton in that way. Um, and she's definitely one of the biggest artists in terms of R&B, pop, and being like successful, like a successful R&B girl. But then again, I'm sure she wouldn't want to like just label herself as R&B, even though that's primarily what the sound and the vibe is. Even though she has songs that aren't like even in the SOS album with the Nobody Gets Me record, it's giving very like um Taylor Swift, Olivia Rodrigo kind of a vibe. Um, but yeah, I think that was interesting. And I made a post on TikTok about how like anything specifically around Kendrick in terms of leading up to releasing GNX, like he had been making like wins, like just back to back consecutive wins, like from the drop of Like That to the whole beef that happened earlier this year to booking the Super Bowl and dropping the album, right? Just a lot of smooth ass moves, right? And I was like, the only L that he got, which really, of course, isn't an L, like legitimately. But I was like, the only L is them releasing the tour during the holiday season because it's like, now inflation thing, and there's talks about there being a potential recession and all these things, and I was thinking if they took a page from the Beyonce playbook, and how a lot of times when Beyonce would release her tours, it would be around the Super Bowl. Granted, it would be around her performing at the Super Bowl too. I think she did in specifically in 2016. I'm trying to think if she did this on in 2013 because I don't think the I think at that point 2013 this was before self-titled came out. Either way, but around 2016 when she was coming out with Lemonade, right? Like the whole rollout was such a smooth move from Formation music video and single came out during the weekend. Then she had the Super Bowl performance, even though it was Coldplay's performance, but she was there with Bruno Mars. So she performed at the Super Bowl, performing Formation, and then had an ad in the Super Bowl announcing her tour and the merchandise for her tour and all these things. And so you go on the website if you want to get tickets. She already had merchandise, and she already had bags with lemonade logos on it, and I got hot sauce in my bag. And the song literally just came out. And I'm like, the fact that she was already prepared and knew that that was going to be a thing. And like that whole rollout was just like smooth. And then I think like the album came out later on in the year. And I was like, it'd have been dope if, and mind you, and the smart thing about that is that it's not long before tax season. I think when the tickets went on sale, I gotta double check specifically with the numbers. But um, she announced the tour, but I think the dates for the tour, like to purchase the tickets, were like not long before tax season, which is smart because Beyonce tickets aren't cheap. And the people who like would want to go, like, I mean, there's definitely celebrities and people with money and business owners and stuff like that who got the bread to get the first row seats and all, but like the little people, us everyday humble folks, gotta work for that money. And and it's smart to release your tickets around tax season because you know that that's when people get their money. you know and I was thinking, if they were to do that, because they're like Kendrick has had a hell of a year. He's already an established artist, like at least a decade into the game. Like his position in the game is already solidified. So whatever his price was gonna be was what it was gonna be. But especially having a year like this, like yesterday's price was not gonna be today's price. So um and plus with SZA too, because like SZA's just been having back to back success, um, and SOS was a huge album, and she had, like, a huge tour from it too, and so I'm like, them together is going to be a coin. So I'm like, if they were to release it, um, if he'd have just took a page from Beyonce's book, like, cause he already got the Super Bowl lined up, so he's gonna be performing at the Super Bowl, headlining on his own. Chances are SZA might come out during the performance, who knows? I don't know. It would be a move. And then if he were to announce, I'm sure they might be able to afford a Super Bowl commercial announcing the tour then and releasing the tickets during um tax season. And yeah, sure, it would be a direct play off of Beyonce's book, but so what? Everybody in the industry copy each other. So I mean, everybody copies and references each other and makes Truman Show references all day. So I mean, I'm sure she wouldn't mind. And the funny thing is, he's on the Lemonade album, Freedom, nonetheless. And speaking of freedom, which happens to be on my jacket, but you know, grateful for the freedom. Um, so yeah, that was a perspective that I had about that. But something that I wanted to say, um, leaning into, so okay, I didn't do a review on GNX. I was thinking about it. I was like, should I do like a live reaction type of thing? But I was like, nah, I don't know, because I don't know if there's gonna be on anything on here that I'm gonna be like clutching my pearls on. So I was like, nah, let me just listen to the album straight through, and then I'll get a sense of it. And something that I hadn't really seen anybody talk about that I figure I'm going to talk about because I don't be scared to talk about these things. Um, is leans more into not conspiracy theory, but a little Truman Show reference, a little bit of just like politics that goes on behind the scenes in the industry. You know, I think it's interesting that Watch the Party Die wasn't on the album. Now, it wasn't like it was released as a single or anything like that. It was just like uploaded on Instagram. And um, and the thing is a lot of people, mind you, this was coming right off of the beef. It was one of the newer releases that he put out after, the beef with him and Drake and everything. But it wasn't necessarily him against Drake. It was him really calling out a lot of the stuff that goes on in the industry and, a lot of the corporate shenanigans that happens behind the scenes. And, just with everything that's going on with like the fall of Diddy and the conversation that's around Jay-Z and everybody that be at the Diddy parties, you know, um, it's interesting. But then mind you, this was, I think, was it right after? It was either right after or right before the announcement of him. No, it was like at the same time, I think. It was like at the same time when they announced that he was doing the Super Bowl, which even that post in itself was interesting. So, you know, I was thinking what's interesting about that is, you know, granted, he is, no pun intended, he is independent now. It was not like, I mean, then again, like he still has close ties with TDE, but he's more of a position to make executive choices about his career more than just the creative. Like he already has like the creative aspect in the bag, but now he's in a position where he can make more business decisions as a businessman. And even though he is independent and he is an established artist, so it's not like he has to do so much of playing the game, but at the same time, he still kind of does, you know? Because, for example, if you're challenging the power structures and corporate and what be going on, to watch the party down, and regardless of who wants to claim who was at what party or not, for him to still get the Super Bowl, you still gotta politic with the party a little bit, you know what I mean? And what I mean by that, and this is in no way shade to Jay-Z, but just based on purely based on, like, public perception, right? Like, if you wanna say, "Oh, Jay-Z was at the parties," or whatever, he still work at the NFL. Like, there's still the connection with, like, Rock Nation and the NFL, and for him to get the Super Bowl gig, even though I feel like there was a chess move and a lot of politics on why Jay-Z chose him, it's still, like, Kendrick still has to, like, that negotiation and still do that job. Now, he could do stuff on his own, like, you know, going on tour and just working specifically with venues, depending on what company they do the tour with, whether it's like Live Nation or whatever it is. But to a degree, even as established as he is, and as popular and as like much as he is the number one guy right now in terms of hip hop and in popularity. And I think GNX is a great album for him to release at this time, just with the climate of every because he really pulled a Drake move, with the whole "Not Like Us" movement, and they not like us, um, with the whole "Not Like Us" movement, but then putting out an album like this sonically, it's a great move because there's a lot of bangers on the album from like the hip hop records. You got like the R&B type of records, the uh the Mexican singer sample that's throughout the album, the Tupac sample, uh, like, but all of it is bops. It's bops throughout the whole album. And it kind of like challenges anybody that had a whole perspective of like, oh, the albums be putting you to sleep type situation. Like, what they be saying about To Pimp a Butterfly or even Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. Even though there are bops on those albums, and we're not gonna act like those albums are whack. It's not like it's whack. It's just not like club bangers throughout the whole album, right? And GNX is something that is. There's a handful of records that you could listen to at the club that is gonna go up when summertime, like Dodger Blue, that's a song. Even Luther, I feel like Luther's a vibe. And plus, you got SZA on the record, and you see there's a whole lot of collaborations with him and SZA right now, which are very um, divine-esque. Especially with the tour rollout and the aesthetic of that. Um, I think it's all bops throughout that whole album, and it's a smart album to put out. That people could vibe to, especially while his name is like at the top. Like when he was like, "Fuck the big three, it's just big me." Like, I mean, and that's nothing against like. I know there's a lot of controversy around Drake right now. Um, and nothing against Cole, because I'm like, there's always going to be a big three, and I've always said, and I will still say, to me, there's a big four because I know big three. If you're just talking about the guys, it would be Drake, Cole, and Kendrick. But I say four because I feel like Nicki should be in that conversation. Nicki came up around the same time as all of them. She's the top R&B girl still to the day. Like, I mean, I don't know if she's still on tour or she got off a tour, but didn't she break records with the Gag City tour and, the whole Pink Friday 2 album? Like, so I feel like when it comes to top rappers of like the 2010s, Nicki is definitely one of those people. And, I don't think she gets talked about in that conversation enough. And, I don't need to be taking up these artists because are these artists taking up for me? But, but I'm just saying. Um, but, to give credit where credit is due and to give respect where respect is due. Um, You know, Nicki is that girl, but she shouldn't just be in the conversation of like top female rappers. She should just be in the conversation of top rappers because she's a top lyricist, skilled rapper, and the across the board, male or female. And I feel like she needs to be in that conversation more. So to for me, it's a top four. But in terms of who's on top right now, it's Kendrick's year. Like Kendrick is the guy right now. And the moves that he's making are in terms of like playing the game, very clever. And it's smart moves to make and good moves to make. Um, but what's interesting, like I was saying, what's interesting is in terms of what be going on behind the scenes with the politics of the business. I mean, I think it's great that he's still in a good relationship with people at TDE. It's not like he had like a bad breakup from them, which you hear a lot in the industry with a lot of artists, say if they leave their labels or, they had a horror story or they got shelved or whatever the case may be. And I think because TDE started out as like a boutique record label and it was very like family oriented, there's always going to be that like family connection. And I love that. I love that for them. I love that it wasn't like a negative parting of ways to a point where even though SZA is now the only, well, not the only, but she's the biggest artist on the label. I mean, you got Doechii, she's doing her thing right now. But, the fact that they can tour together and it's like, yeah, Kendrick's got his own thing. And I'm sure Punch supports him being independent and doing, having his own label. And that's what it's supposed to be. Like that's how the industry and the business should be run. Like, I mean, then again, we probably seen that with funny enough, with Cash Money and OVO. I don't know if Drake is still connected with Cash Money, but there's always still that love and respect for Wayne. I know there was the issues with Birdman and stuff like that at one point. Um, and Drake kind of has like his own thing, but he's still much in connection with like the big major labels with Universal, which he's kind of beefing with right now because of the whole Kendrick beef. But that's another conversation for another time. That's not what I wanted to get at. But and the thing is, you know, I'm not 100% sure, but I think Kendrick still might be in connection with a label in terms of distribution. I don't know if they do management or not. I look up those specifics, but I know he's more in a position of control, no pun intended. um, in terms of the business side of things. However, my point and what I'm really getting at here is like he still has to play the game. You know what I mean? Like even in the position that he's in, and even if he wants to, challenge the powers that be and the executives and all the wicked stuff that be going on in the industry, like you still gotta play that game, you know? And kind of like how, bring it back to NFL and the Super Bowl and everything, kind of like how where Jay-Z is right now. At one point he was going head to head with NFL and and the Grammys and whatnot. Even though him and Beyonce are like darlings of the Grammys. But there are times where the Grammys be snubbing them. But it's like y'all are some of the most nominated people ever. Like and some of y'all are the most awarded people ever. But I get it. Like y'all want the main awards, but my God, what more do you want in the world? But but um but but that's not the point. The point is at one point, you know, in the Carter's album, Everything Is Love, he even says like, F the NFL, we in Super Bowl, I mean we in stadiums too. Tell the NFL we don't need you. You need me, I don't need you. Um, we in stadiums too, right? But then lo and behold, there's a partnership with the NFL. And I guess the angle, even though he got a lot of flack for that at first because it was like, oh, at one point y'all was supposed to be F the NFL, and a lot of what was going on at the time was the whole um blackballing of Colin Kaepernick because of his stance in, him kneeling during the national anthem. And I feel like one redeeming moment for Jay-Z could have been if they were able to like broker some type of deal to get him back in the league. And it's unfortunate that that never happened, you know? Um, but I mean, he was still in position, but at the same time, he's been able to do great things at the NFL in terms of like the halftime show, especially with the the LA performance that with all the LA artists as well as like 50 Cent and Mary J. Blige and even Kendrick because he performed at that Super Bowl. Now the whole like controversy about that in terms of like, oh, it should have been Wayne thing. I get both sides. I get both sides about that, but it makes more sense for it to have been Kendrick. Like I would have for the culture and the fact that Wayne is from New Orleans, and I know that that's something he talked about. I would have liked to see him perform there just for the sake of like culture. But in terms of who had the bigger year and where it would have made more sense, it makes more sense for it to be Kendrick, you know? And where people were upset about it being like Kendrick versus Wayne, I'm like, in situations like that, people get too caught up about the pieces on the board rather than the hand that's moving the pieces. And a lot of times that's what people get caught up with and beefing about like situational things like, oh, this is all Kendrick's fault and this and that. But it's like, okay, but who put him in that position? I even go into that debate in my own life. It's like, okay, y'all be looking at the situations, but y'all don't look at the bigger piece at hand, or the bigger play at hand and the bigger strategy. But I get it because you're just looking at the big names that's in the headlines. But at the same time, you're not looking at the people who are skilled and who make the decisions and who could potentially avoid these circumstances. So even though for the sake of optics, it's a smarter move to book Kendrick for the Super Bowl. He had the bigger year. It was his moment. And, he, and I mean, even if you want to play to like the whole like beef with Kendrick and Drake, you know, with the whole first person shooter reference, like as big as the Super Bowl, and Kendrick is now headlining the Super Bowl. And very much like, you know, like the whole person shooter thing. Big three, it's just big me. And literally it is big him performing at the Super Bowl. Like it's just good moves. It's good moves to make. Um and but at the same time, you have to look at all the parties involved and all the pieces involved. And the fact that again, Jay-Z is one of those people who makes that decision. And then you can go into the whole like backstory and rabbit hole of like, you know, back in the day when there was this whole like brief beef between Lil Wayne and Jay-Z or whatever the case may be. Even though I don't really think that that had much to do with that decision, that could play a part. But then also you got to look at the other people who make that decision too. Like who else is on the board that decides who's going to be the performing act aside from Jay-Z? Like even that in itself is like, okay, we know Jay-Z because he was an artist at one point and he was, he public figure. But who else is on the board? Who else is making those, you know, the decisions and pulling the strings in terms of the political moves that the public would see? You know, who's the executives that we might not know, but has a lot of impact in that? Those are the people you look at, when it comes to these situations. Like When there's situations and scenarios, you always have to ask, like, okay, who benefits from this? Who benefits the most from this? Where's the money going? Like, you have to follow the money trail and understand, like, who's the most strategic, you know? And yeah, these are the things to consider. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. But and, I don't know, I just feel like when it comes to this industry stuff, I don't know all the specifics, you know? I'm not in the industry, even though I am the industry. Um, but I feel like more on the lines of the Truman Show perspectives of it all. I feel like there's a lot of pandering that be going on. Um, and but the pandering has to do with playing the game, because it's like you really have to be in a like a solid position of power to go up against like corporate and the power structures that are pretty wicked in their ways. But at the same time, they're still power structures. And to some degree, in order for certain moves to be made and certain connections to be had, you still have to interact with these people. You still have to interact with these individuals. Like for example, even I'm not saying that this is um a company. Well, more thoughts on that later. For example, on basically as an example, not a specific thing about this particular company. So when Kendrick did the interview with Harper's Bazaar, you know, to a degree, yes, he's an independent act, but not that he needed to do the interview with Harper's Bazaar, but I felt like again it was another smart move to make where there was strategic things that could have been done and said. And even I feel like low key, I'm sure people peep this, but I haven't seen too many people actually say this. I feel like even that magazine um article in itself was a jab at Drake because if you look at the cover of the Harper Bazaar cover with him on it, where he's being interviewed with SZA, which again was a smart move and like Easter eggs to them doing music together and going on tour together. And then even SZA like briefly mentioning that she was working on the movie with Cat Williams. And Cat Williams had a big moment earlier this year, and now the movie is like rolling out sometime next month or whatever. You gotta play the game, right? It's interesting, and it's a different demographic of people, but it's leaning into like the high fashion world. But okay, but quickly on the point that I think was a jab to Drake, I feel like cover of the magazine is a reference to Majid Jordan's Good People album. If you look at the album cover, if you look at the cover of the magazine and how like the border is going through the words Harper's Bazaar, Good People. Okay, that type of thing. I don't know. Just and Majid Jordan was um Drake's artist. And well, I don't know if they're still signed on OVO. I think they are, but I'm not 100% sure. I got to double check that. But um yeah. Anyway, so I don't know if that was a jab to Drake. I don't know. 'Cause anyway, just a thought. Um, but my point in even bringing that up is that you still got to work with the corporate that's Harper's Bazaar. You know what I mean? Like, that's still a corporation within not necessarily the music industry, but more so the fashion industry, but it's a power structure. Now it's not something that he has to do all the time. Doing magazine covers, that's like this is a brief thing, and it comes around maybe every once in a few years or whatever. It's not like a reoccurring thing like the Grammys every time you release a project. Or and I'm trying to think of what's something artists would do that's more common. Like media. You know what I mean? Like say be doing interviews. If you're the type of artist to do interviews. And I guess what also makes it a really good move is that we don't really see Kendrick do interviews like that, and he doesn't have to. You know, um, the most that we've seen him interact with us, the public, is through art, through music, throughout the beef, throughout his features on other artists' project, um, a magazine, Harper's Bazaar, which is a high fashion magazine, um, the album, releasing the tour. Like we hadn't seen him do like a drink champs, even though I would love to see that, you know. Especially with like him breaking off and doing PG Lane. Like I would love to hear like the backstory of how they got that started and the whole business side of things. Like I love to hear all of that. Like I love the the operations of it all, especially from experience being an operational manager or whatever. I just like to know the inner workings of how a business runs. Kind of like, not to keep bringing her up, but, you know, Beyonce herself. When she did her interview with GQ earlier this year, and it was based around her businesses. Um, but she did the interview through email, which is interesting. But I mean, it's smart at the same time because it gives you the space to really like edit and tweak what you want to say and be intentional about the message that you want to put out. So, and it's smart. It's a smart thing to do. And again, we don't see her interview, but the ways that she communicates with the public, well, at least I don't know. I haven't really been following Beyonce too much these days, but I did read that article. And I did hear about like, the whole whiskey and, some of the products and stuff that she got going on. So she might be communicating more than I know. Um, I'm just not paying attention. No shade. It's just, I'm just I have reservations about a lot that's going on in this industry. So I really don't care to follow this as much anymore. But I respect the artistry when it is solely about the art. And but at the same time, kind of my point in having to work with these corporate structures. There's a lot that has to go into adding and referencing and doing all of this and that in the art. And the art just can't even be the art anymore, you know? And that's why I kind of just like don't care to follow a lot of these artists like that. And I get it because you gotta play the game. You're in the industry, especially newer artists that are signing to these labels, and it's like, oh, by the way, you gotta do this this product placement in the music video because this is advertising and this is what's paying for the video. Instead of just making a dope video for the sake of making dope art. Everything has to be like an Easter egg or product placement or hidden messages or symbolisms and all this stuff. And it's just like, can we just get back to making art? Can we just make quality music and quality visuals and all this stuff? And I feel like, to a degree, that's kind of what Kendrick was alluding to with the whole watch the party die moment. And as a fan of art, purely, I'm here for that, you know? But then also in Truman Show references, I'm here for that too. But at the same time, it's like, okay, it's one thing to say that, but to really stand on that, it would force you to have to operate how you move in the game. And some people just aren't in position to do that. Like something that I said in my previous live stream talking about this album. And what he says in the song is like, the higher you go, the more your spiritual is tried. And say if you want to break away from a lot of the that goes on in the business, in some ways you can't, and then in some ways you still gotta play the game. In some ways you still gotta make these references. In some ways you still gotta say this and do that, And a lot of times it's I don't know, I just feel like there was I know this is kind of unrelated in terms of uh realms and worlds, but the sentiment is the point that I want to make. I was watching I think I was watching oh no, yeah, I know what it was. I was watching Bernie Sanders be interviewed with Jon Stewart on Jon Stewart's podcast on the weekly show. And um I forget exactly which question Jon Stewart was asking, but um I think it has something to do with like bipartisan decisions in terms of passing laws. And Bernie Sanders was saying that it's not a matter of people not caring about certain issues. It's a matter of, trying to work with people on the other side. Like if you're Democrat or if you're independent or whatever, you're trying to get a law passed and you're trying to persuade someone that's Republican to vote um in favor of the law or the bill. And morally, and consciously, they're like, I support this. This makes sense. But I can't vote the way that you want me to vote because then it'll mess up my business over here with the other Republicans, type of thing, you know? And there's a lot of that goes on. And it's like, there's people who morally know it makes sense to pass this bill, but because of the politics behind the scenes and working with the corporations, you gotta vote against what you really believe. And I'm pretty sure there's some people who really just don't be caring and just really just be saying anything and just vote against the BS just because, that's just how they feel. But I feel like there's a lot of that's happening in the industry more than I mean, there's always those conversations about conspiracies and, the backdoor deals and all these things. But I feel like we're seeing 2024 has been a year where a lot of those things are coming to the light. And I feel like 2025 is hopefully a time where not only will we see exactly how that works behind the scenes, but more and more people being courageous enough to challenge it. Because I don't think that's the case right now. I think in order for people to really stand up and say, you know what, we're not playing these games. I don't care if I have to go through you to do this. I'm doing this for the art, or I don't stand for, or I don't agree with what you stand for, or what you want me to do with the album, or with this movie, or whatever the case may be. And if it's going to be a little bit harder for me to make it successful, then so be it. But I'm not compromising my morals because you want me to say and do this in the project, and I don't agree with what you stand for. I feel like there's people who feel that way but are too scared to actually stand on it. And there's some people who probably try to stand on it, and then, you know, them people make it a little bit harder for them, you know? And it's really a spiritual thing too. Like it is trying people's spirits, you know. Um that whole saying selling your soul, that's a real thing. Like that's not just like, oh, um scary talk or whatever the case may be. Like, no, that's a legitimate thing. Like there's There's a lot that goes on in this world, and music one of the most powerful tools to influence and affect the subconscious mind, you know? And when you know these things, um, or say, or let me say this, when you don't know these things and you're just an artist and you just want to make your art and you just want to sing your songs and film your videos because that's what you love to do and you're damn good at it. But you got these corporations saying, all right, we'll push your product, we'll push your album, and we'll get it number one over here. We'll make sure it's streaming on Spotify here. We'll do the ads in Times Square over here. But you gotta reference this in your music. You gotta say it like this. And you gotta do this and you gotta have these symbols in the background in the music video. And so you don't know what all of that stands for. To you, it's just like, all right, whatever. These just what I gotta do. But you don't know that these are things that have intentional influence over the subconscious mind. And not just, you know, the artist in particular, but everyone. It influences everybody's subconscious mind. Everybody, their own subconscious mind, whether you know it or not, is being persuaded and influenced to think a certain way and to move a certain way without even realizing what all is happening. And by the time you realize, you've already been conditioned to like this song. You've already been conditioned to like love this music video because she looks so fabulous in this dress, but you don't realize they're wearing a red dress symbolically because it's referring to this symbolism and this historical context. And it's like sometimes people like when you think like that, people are like, "Oh, you're being a conspiracy theorist," and it's like, no, it's really like that. It's really like that, and people are waking up to that and recognizing, oh wait, so when you go back and watch certain stuff, and it's like, oh, they were saying a lot more than I realized what they were saying. I was just singing along to the song, dancing because it was a vibe. But now that I can, decode and decipher these corporation hidden languages, you realize there's more to this music stuff than just putting out art. And I feel like for the artists that actually want to challenge that, they have to toe the line. They gotta toe the line of like speaking in code and going along with the thing, but then acting like they don't want to, but then actually they are. And you know what's interesting? What's actually pretty clever and interesting is when these corporations tell the artists, "Oh yeah," and throw jabs at the corporation too while you're at it. Like, like act as if you're combative with us. So, the people can rally behind you, but we're still paying you and we're still getting paid off of you, even though you're like shading us too. You know, it's like it's like kind of like fake activism in a way. And like it's kind of like orchestrated or fabricated being against the establishment or like fake raging against the machine. And basically trying to gain the demographic of people that are against corporate, but corporate still gets paid off that. I mean, like, and that's what be happening. That's what be happening in this industry. And it's like, who do you trust? Like, who can the people actually rely on being standing on what they say? You know? And I mean, it's interesting because that's how you get to promote artists. Like, I'm not saying that this is what they do. I'm not saying that this is what they do, but I'm saying, like, if you're a record label and you're promoting an artist or a group like Public Enemy, you know, and a lot of their music is like establishment and challenging the powers that be. but the powers that be are the corporations that they have to go through in order to push the music, you know? Even though to some degree, like, I'm sure they be trying to, like, they don't really want them to go at them, but I'm sure there's corporations who instruct their artists to kinda, like, you know, play into that, but those same corporations that are getting jabbed in the music still be getting paid off the music. So, I don't know, but again, people gotta play the game. People gotta play the game. And when you see this, you know, I don't know, I'm just point the whole purpose of me even saying this is me just like highlighting this or just pointing that out because I feel like that's what be happening. And also to suggest to people when you see these situations like, you know, Kendrick being booked to perform at the Super Bowl and there's this uproar because it should have been Wayne or whatever. I just implore that you think about the politics that goes on behind the scenes. And and even not only that, but even the people who are making the decisions, there are a handful of times and chances where they probably didn't even want to make those decisions. I'm not saying that that's specifically the case with the Super Bowl. I'm just saying that in a very general way. But when taking that for example, as an audience, as people who are on the outside looking in, you have to consider there's more that goes on to these moves than what we physically see. Like on the outside looking in, it's a smart move for Kendrick. It's a good look and it's a great for him, especially at the climate of everything. But you really have to take in consideration what be happening behind the scenes. Why was the move made? Who benefits the most? And did that person really want to make that move? Or did they make that move because it's the best move to make for the business? Like you really have to think about all of these things rather than just looking at things from the surface. Because from the surface, it could just look like they didn't care about Wayne. They just want to sign Kendrick. When it actually makes sense for it to be Kendrick based on the year that he has, and it's nothing against Wayne. I feel like Wayne is great, but like legitimate, like honestly, Kendrick is a better performer right now. He is. Like he's worked on his stage presence to a point where it's not just him standing there rapping. Like there's choreography, there's costumes, there's staging, there's set design, like, there's a lot that goes into like, even the snippet that you seen him do at the Super Bowl last time, I'm like, "Yeah, this man is not just a lyricist and a rapper, he's a performer, he's an artist," you know? So, yeah, visually and on top of the fact that he had a big year, it just made sense. But there's more that going on behind the scenes. There's chess that be at play, and that's nothing against Wayne. Wayne is a legend in his own right. And for the culture, I wouldn't have been mad if they picked Wayne, but I understand why they picked Kendrick. But again, you have to understand who's making the decisions and why are they making the decisions? Who's pulling the strings? Who's the one behind the scenes? And what is the political plays at hand? And who benefits the most? These are the questions that you have to ask with anything, not even just music or whatever. But like I said, like the political um example that Bernie Sanders was saying. He's like, yeah, there's people who want to vote certain ways, but they can't vote certain because of the politics and the relationships and the people that they're connected to or the people lobbying and the corporations that's paying them to vote a certain way, even though they morally know this should be fucked up, you know? And you have to take that into consideration when you think about these companies and what we see on the surface or what we even hear. What we hear in the music, the symbolism, the visuals, or just in any industry. It could be the the medical industry, it could be the food industry, you know, we see what we see on the surface, what's being shown to us because that's what they want to show us. But you have to question what be going on behind the scenes. What y'all be doing back there? You know what I mean? Like, who's pulling the strings? Who's suggesting the plays? That type of thing. And not too many people ask those questions because chances are there's people that's making these decisions that's suggesting the plays because it benefits them to a degree. Maybe even if they don't agree with the decision in itself, but it benefits them to make this decision to maintain certain relationships with people in positions of power because they know in order to remain in power, you got to uphold these relationships and play the game. And not too many people be thinking about the game that's being played, you know? And I also use this example in my other live stream, and I'll say it again. And again, another reference to Jay-Z. If you look at Beyonce's Black is King video or the movie film, specifically the visual during Move Forever, where you see Jay-Z playing chess, right? You got butlers, which I was here for, holding the chessboards around the house or whatever while Beyonce's looking fabulous and playing pool and got the butler to hold the pool stick. But in the video, there's a scene where they're outside and there's a human chessboard on the field. And the moves that Jay-Z is making on the chessboard, on the physical chessboard, with like the wooden pieces, are affecting the human chessboard, right? Which I feel like might be a Truman Show reference. Um, well, there's a lot of that in that film, but that's another conversation for another time. Um, but specifically, the point in that is sometimes y'all be looking at the board and y'all be looking at moves, but you don't be seeing the invisible hand that's pushing the pieces. And not only do you not even consider or think about the visible hand pushing the pieces, you got to think about the strategy that that chess player is going into the game to move those pieces. What's the benefit of each move? And you have to think about, is this chess player like a novice chess player or are they a grandmaster? Are they someone that's skilled in the openings, in the middle game, in the end game, and they know the strategies and how they're going to open and which pieces, and to a point where they could predict the next person's moves, to a point where I'm going to intentionally move you so you're forced to make the move that I want you to make versus the move that you want to. Like y'all don't be thinking about that enough. You know, y'all be entertained by it, but y'all don't be like thinking about the logistics of how that works in this industry, just in life, because that probably be happening to y'all in your own lives when you work your jobs and you know you're just seeing your boss or your supervisor, but you don't understand the person that's in the corporate offices making the decision that's enforcing the emails that goes to your supervisor that's causing your supervisor to make you do this thing that you don't feel like doing. And for people who've been the supervisor, you know what I'm talking about. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Where your boss tells you, okay, we want you to do this and this and this. And you got to tell the team to do this. And the team be pissed at you, but it's like, you're just doing your job. You're just doing what you're told to do. And people are pissed at you for based on the thing that you were told to do without really thinking about there's higher ups that's pushing these moves. Say, as a supervisor, you don't want to do that shit. You don't want to do that shit, but this how you gotta eat. This how you pay your bills. But you got your boss who pays you, who signs the bill, who provides the benefits to tell you, "Oh, yeah, you gotta do this with the team." Not a team looking at you crazy as if you the one running the whole show. And y'all gotta think about these things. Not and like I said, not just in the music industry, but in life. And it's really like following the money. Following who's the most strategic person here? Who benefits the most out of this move? And just because they made the move doesn't necessarily mean that they wanted to make that move. Because a lot of that be happening more times than not. It's happened several times in my own life where there's just certain things that's happened that, you know, I'm like, I don't want to do this, but there's not many other options. And I gotta do this in order to get over here. So, and there's certain times where you're a pawn in somebody else's game and you're being influenced into doing shit that you don't even realize there's a bigger play at hand. But there's an agenda being pushed through you. And I feel like, all in all, my main point in this video, to bring it back full circle, I feel like that's what be happening in this music industry. And it really takes somebody in the industry to know really the inner workings of how that all plays out. Because people in industry points it out better, but the people that's on the outside, like the audience, the consumers, people who are just casually listening. For a long time, I didn't really understand how like the business side of things worked. Like even when I was younger, one because again I wasn't, well, to my knowledge, um, you know, aware of what be happening in this industry. But I just knew like I wanted to be an artist, and I knew that upon realizing like you could be an independent artist, I'm like, oh, I want to do this myself. I want to be my own boss. It's funny, everything that I've always strived for, like in hindsight, in full circle, made so much sense in my life. Like I was just thinking about this yesterday. How, even though at the time, I mean, even now, like I haven't dated in like almost 5 years now. So I haven't been in a personal need to get an abortion or have like, um, just like anything in regards to that. However, upon realizing that there was a rally for Roe v. Wade, I was like, oh yeah, I'm there, in terms of advocating for women's autonomy over their bodies, specifically their wombs, and women being able to make decisions for their own bodies and have control and freedom over their own bodies and their own wombs, rather than the government or patriarchy or any man trying to control and tell a woman what to do with her body and her vagina and her womb for profit. And then try to create like this facade of a moral compass to justify trying to tell a woman what to do with her body or control a woman's body. There's this facade of a justified reason. It's like, oh, we got to save the kids, pro life. And it's like, y'all don't give a fuck about them kids. Because when the kids get here, y'all don't do anything to provide for them kids. And if anything, y'all place judgment on the mothers or the families that struggles to raise these kids. And don't do nothing to help raise these kids, but be pro-life. Be, oh my God, we gotta save the babies. But y'all don't be there when the babies is born. You know what I mean? Now, I did say on my last live stream, I did critique, um, you know, certain people's motives. Because my thing is, I'm all for the autonomy. I know this is a tangent, but there's a point. I'm all for the autonomy of a woman in their body, right? And my point in even bringing this up is that in hindsight, I haven't had a personal need for that, but I knew it was a stance that I had no problem, you know, showing up and fighting for without realizing how um, personal that would be for me. But I was just showing up for the fight for women because it's what I stand for and always have for the freedom and autonomy of women. And, it's interesting how that all plays out in life. But the one critique that I had is that although for the everyday person and the everyday woman, I do believe that women should be able to make that decision. I feel like there's people in positions of power that support that cause for more sinister reasons in terms of being able to harvest and use the remains of aborted babies. That's the part that I think is fucked up. But I do believe that it should be an option available to women to make that decision for themselves and not have a power structure, have a control over a woman's body in their womb and any aspect of a woman's physical, spiritual, mental, financial being. Um, yeah, so I think that's interesting. But my point in making that is like it's interesting how, you know, some of the things that I stood up and advocate and fight for, thinking that it might not have anything to do with me, but just because it's the right thing to stand for as a woman, um, realizing in hindsight how it um relates to me in a way. And and I mean, again, I have no need for an abortion, but um, you know, I'll just say there's been situations and circumstances where fighting for the truth, autonomy, and liberation and freedom of my womb has been prevalent in my life. And that's all I'll say for that. But to bring it back to what I was saying about the music industry, um, it's interesting that, you know, we support these artists because we like the music. It makes us feel good. We like to dance and sing and hum along to the songs. And there might be sentimental value with these songs, like, oh, this is the song that we danced to at my wedding. And like when we first hung out, this was the song that was playing, or like stuff like that. There's always like a sentimental value to music. And that's what makes music beautiful. That's what makes art so important because it's literally the soundtrack of our lives, right? Um, and music at its purest form can be a marker of beautiful memories and even painful ones too. Like, if you're going through a breakup or whatever the case may be, and you got that song that's getting you through the vibes and the emotions. It's just unfortunate how convoluted art has become, you know? And I think that's ultimately the point. And I think it's hard for people and artists to make a stand for something and really stand on it. But then again, at the same time, they gotta play the game. They be having to play the game. And speaking of realizing um, deeper significance and sentiment with certain things, um, I've referenced on many occasions this interview um, with Byron Allen at the Breakfast Club. It was from 5 years ago at this point in space and time of me recording this 5 years ago. Um, and it's funny because in hindsight, again, in hindsight, there's always new revelations um, or things that um, weren't significant at the time that become significant now. For example, he mentioned something about going to Congress or having to, no, Congress, be in Supreme Court about like his case with Viacom or Comcast because he was saying something about like to them just having racist practices. And he mentioned Kamala Harris, Senator Kamala Harris at the time, and Senator Cory Booker. And the first several times I had watched that name hadn't stuck out to me, just because like I wasn't really familiar with Kamala Harris at the time. Um, and now her being the vice president, and him saying that she was in support of his case or something along those lines is what he was saying. I forget the specifics of what he said, but he mentioned her in regards to that case. And and I was like, oh, okay, interesting. Um, but this was like 5 years ago. And I was like, wow, yeah, new perspectives. But anyway, my point in even bringing that up is he says in there, there's a lot of gems, a lot of gems, in that live. I mean, in that interview. Um, excuse me. And he says, "Don't play the game, own the game. Don't play the game, own the game." And that's stuck with me for several years. Well, since he said it, really. And it's interesting because I started playing chess recently, maybe like a year ago or something like that. And I say that which is a reference to him uh in a song that I have called Front End, like, getting paid on the front end. And it goes like um en passant all you want, you'll still be losing. Your queen lady, baby, because I ain't no pawn. I don't play no games no more because I own the board. And it's a chess reference. And then also a reference to that, which I low key kind of like forgot about, but because I like say it so much. And, and it's not saying like, oh, never play any games. It's like life is a game at this point. Like we all have to play the game of life to some degree. Um, and in some aspects that might not always necessarily be true in real time, but eventually it will be because it can manifest, you know, in terms of being in a position where you don't have to play the fucking game anymore. You can own your own game and say, I don't gotta play what the fuck what y'all got going on. I don't gotta follow this protocol that y'all want me to. I'm gonna do my thing because fuck y'all. For even trying to control me and manipulate me and get me to do this bullshit and then want to like not take accountability or blame, all this weird things. Nah, I own my board. Fuck y'all board is how I be feeling about the power structures of life. Um, but also something that he says in that um video is, you gotta lose fear and burn the knee pads, because you can't be fearful when it comes to your dreams and the things that you want and your desires because there's always going to be a risk. There's always going to be someone saying, oh, this might not go well, or it might fall apart here, or oh, you made this mistake before, you're probably going to make this mistake again, or we remember when you did this, so you probably shouldn't do that. And it's like, if you get caught up in that, you will never get anything done. And I realized that in my life, like, there's people who play and pander as if they're in support of you, but really just to get you down a certain path, just to say, oh, by the way, it's not going to work out. And you just got to say, like, fuck you to shit. Because, everybody makes mistakes in their lives. And you don't know what people be going through. And what bothers me is when you do know what people be going through and you still choose to give them a hard time. Like you do know the bullshit that folks be enduring and like adversities that people face and why they're even facing that adversity in the first place. And to still place judgment and to still give people a hard time and still tell them, oh, but you make this mistake here, you did this blunder here. So, you know, but it's like, okay, so have you in your life. And if you see what people be dealing with and you be giving them a hard time, and as if you wouldn't know how to handle the situation given that were in that position. Like, that's the thing that really like pissed me off too. It's like, people be having a lot to like say in terms of like judging mistakes that you've made based on a struggle they never have ever had to face. People will swear up and down and criticize you for the mistakes that you made, for the times that you said something wrong, for the times that you did this wrong, knowing that there's things in environments around you that created that scenario in the first place or influenced why you would even have to react that way. And then still try to give you a hard time about it, but don't be presenting no solutions. Be trying to line you up to fail as if people weren't born to be failures. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not saying that we're born to be failures because I rebuke that in my own life and anybody else's life, but also referencing Byron Allen. He said, he was born blackballed. Like people are like, oh, you're gonna be blackballed, or people are gonna cancel you. And it's like, no, you were born to be like blackballed and canceled before you even got here. Depending on your background, depending on your the country that you're born into, depending on your culture. Some of us were born in a fucked position. And somehow, some way, you just gotta make the best of it because those are the cards that you were dealt. You ain't picked them fucking cards. Those things were set before you even knew what was going on. And then people be so quick to tell you what you should and can't do with your life or what you should have did and oh, but you messed up here, or but you said this about this person, so we gonna hang it over you. Even though, mind you, those people be doing the grimiest shit, but you know, and it makes like I was thinking earlier today, it's crazy how you got situations where there's people in these corporate structures, because the full circle, this does tie into what I was talking about. You got these people who will exploit people's talents. All right, like this specifically. You got people who will exploit their own children for gain, to build empires, to build a power structure, and come up with a convoluted reason to justify it when really they could have just prevented these. Like, there's a handful of ways those circumstances could have been handled, but they care more about making money than they do about taking care of their children and protecting their children. And these be the same people that will have children that will sacrifice everything and go above and beyond and out of their way to not only fight for them, but protect them. It be the same power structures and families that pimp and exploit their own kids while their kids are fighting to love them. And it's like, how you got kids that would do everything to fight and protect you and to love you. Meanwhile, you do nothing to protect that child. And while they show up and show you love and work hard as you're pimping and exploiting them, they don't even have any type of care or heart to even feel remotely bad or like, damn, this person really loves me. Nah, they just want gain. They just want power. And these are the same people that ruthlessly climb their way up corporate ladders, you know? And that whole like conversation about like it takes hard work to get to these positions. It's hard work that involves somebody getting fucked over more times than not. And that's just the facts. That's just the truth. That's the truth of the matter. And I suggest y'all wake to it. Like, yeah, there is hard work involved. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it don't be that at all. There's definitely hard work. But I'm sure we all know somebody that works hard that still be at the bottom. I'm sure we all know some people that works hard, talented, dedicated, but because they're not willing to compromise certain morals or they're not willing to compromise their integrity or whatever the case may be, they don't make it to the top. But the crazy thing is that those people that be at the top that do the wildest shit to compromise their own like integrity be so quick to judge people at the bottom for when those people at the bottom do or might do, slip up and do things that might question their integrity just because they're at the bottom and they're trying to climb their way up, just like those people at the top, you know? Because it's like you judging somebody from the hood for selling drugs, but they selling drugs because they can't get any other opportunity and they just trying to find a way to feed themselves and take care of their family. And yeah, sure, it might not be the best move, it might not be the smartest move, but they doing what the fuck they gotta do just to get ahead. But you got these people in these corporate positions that do the grimiest shit to get ahead. A lot of them, some of them don't even got no morals, don't even got no integrity. And it's not even a matter of like getting out of survival mode, it's just for the sake of greed and power. And it's like, it's giving very pot calling the kettle black, but it be people on their high horse that places judgment on people at the bottom that make mistakes just trying to find a way, just trying to survive out here, just trying to get ahead you know, and especially when they're in situations where they're intentionally, you know, in environments or in family structures that don't have the answers or don't raise them right or whatever the case may be. So they just trying to get it how they can, how they know. And then of course, and I think it takes a lot and people don't give enough credit for the people who can have the self-awareness to recognize their mistakes and actually want to do better. We don't talk about that enough. I talk about that all the time, but we don't talk about that enough as a people. Of the folks that make mistakes and say, you know what, damn, I fucked up. Let me work on this. Because some people, we just need to keep people at the bottom. We're like, we're gonna constantly remind you of this mistake. We're gonna constantly tell you about the time where you did this and how messed up you are. But I'm like, these be the same people at the Diddy parties. But you want to talk about morals and you know, and this all ties back to watching the party die. You know, it's like it's crazy to me how, you know, some of the same people that's in these positions of power will look down upon and judge and criticize people at the bottom for just doing what they got to do to try to survive and make a life for themselves, being born into situations where they were already blackballed, like named to be blackballed. But meanwhile, these same people that be in these positions don't even be having no morals. Like, you got all this stuff coming out in this day and age in this wicked world, in these wicked power structures where there's spiritual warfare, there's spiritual abuse, people be siphing people's energies. You got child trafficking going on. You got it's just a lot of dark, sinister stuff that be going on. And those be the same people trying to kick a message about like justified, convoluted moral compasses. I mean, you know, but I get it. I get it, you know. But again, the music and we've been watching these music videos and these films and listening to the music for the last 30 years, so it's already in our subconscious mind to believe a certain way unless we wake up to the fact that we've all been hoodwinked and we've all been bamboozled by these power structures and recognize that we all can free our minds. And mind you, these same people that do all this weird sinister stuff, they don't even trying to repent. They don't even be trying to right their wrongs. They don't even recognize the error of their ways and care to do better. That's the thing. I'm like, recognize the people who can own up to their wrongs and actually do the work to fix it versus the people who don't. Versus the people who know they dead wrong, know they fucked up, and don't ever have accountability. But more life to the people who are able to correct their ways and recognize the errors of their mistake and actually have the courage and the heart to say, you know what, this ain't right. I want to do better for me, but then also in me doing better for me, I recognize when y'all not doing right and I'm going to call it out and I'm going to say something because it's the right thing to do. And to really effectively be able to do that and not have anybody like fuck with you is when you own board. And nobody like when you're in a financial position or a position of power and it's like nobody could really fuck with you is when you own the board. But let me say this too. There might be some people out in the world that might not necessarily be in position to own the board just yet. That don't mean you ain't got power though. Because, I'm waking up to and learning a lot about like metaphysical stuff. This is where I get into my spiritual bag. Um, in the best way. Um, Even people with limited resources or people dealing with struggle or whatever the case may be, which is temporary, we're more powerful than we're led to believe. We're more powerful than we're led to believe. And there are power structures, specifically these corporations that be trying to influence the music, to have you dumbed down and stagnant and stuck and ignorant to the true power within you. And if they tell you the power that you have, they have you using it for destruction. They have you using your power to attack people and, you know, put sickness through the content and all these things. And of course, they give you a reason to justify it. But again, people be so focused on the is on the board and not focused on the grandmaster with the strategies that's moving the pieces. So I say all this to say, who are you in the board of your life? Are you a piece on somebody else's board? Just following orders, letting people tell you what to do? Are you someone who owns the board and decides to take control of their life and studies the strategies that best work in your favor to make smart moves? Are you somebody that maybe you're in position to make certain moves, but you compromise and settle for moves that you really don't want to make just to be in a certain position? Or are you somebody that's courageous enough to say, yeah, I'm in a position of power, and if I make this move, it might be challenging, but it's the right thing to do? Or are you the person that sees all the things that's going on and decides, you know what, I'm just going to play along. I don't want to rock the boat. I'm just going to, yeah, I know this shit is fucked up, but I'm going to do it anyway. Yeah, I'm going to use my content for this. Are you the type of person that don't even evaluate the board at all? Don't even realize you in the game? Or that somebody else is trying to get you in their game? Are you the type of person that willfully chooses to ignore the hand moving the pieces? Like, what are you? What do you choose to be in your life? Or are you somebody that panders and plays both sides? Are you playing the game? Are you playing the game to get ahead? Because you got to play. Sometimes you got to play on the white side. Sometimes you got to play on the black side. I mean, that's really up for y'all. There's just something that I felt like should be discussed because I don't see enough people talking about it. As it pertains to people in the industry, in the music industry. But it's not just the music industry, it's all industries. It's all power structures, all corporations, whether it's politics, whether it's entertainment, whether it's the health industry, whether it's international affairs, whether it's your own personal life, whether it's, the job that you work. And depending on what position you are, if you're like just someone that's maybe entry level and that's where you're starting out or that's where you are right now in life, and that's okay. Or if you're a supervisor, if you're someone in a position of management, but you still got a boss, or maybe you are the boss and you have to broker different deals and you have to, delegate tasks and, operate a business and, you know, lead a team. Regardless, it all it's all connected. And not only is it all connected, but we're more powerful than we are led to believe, regardless of whatever position you're in your life. But it's really up to you to decide, are you a piece in somebody else's game? Are you playing the game or do you own the game? It's up to y'all. Well, with that said, much love to you guys. I'm going to conclude this live stream here and let that marinate in your subconscious mind, but not to control you, to liberate you and inspire and hopefully awaken you and empower you. Much love. It's your girl Narice, and I'll catch you at the next live stream. Oh yeah, I have music on SoundCloud. You should check it out. Um, I've done covers and I also have done original songs. And I'm working on new music and I'm really excited about it. And I'm excited about the process. So I look forward to, you know, putting out some creative things. I've been doing like visuals and photo shoots and stuff like that. So that will be released soon. So be on the lookout.